Welcome to the Nerd and Normie Podcast. I'm a big film nerd, Everett.
And I'm Emerald, and I'm engaged to a nerd.
On this week's episode, we will be covering
The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green.
And As Bestas, or The Beast, directed by Rodrigo Sorogoyen. For both of these movies, as they are relatively new releases, we will do non-spoilers first, and then spoilers. There will be timecodes in the description below. Let's get into it.
Don't be scared.
We've met before.
All right. So this week I chose The Exorcist Believer because I'm a big horror fan, and it looked like it could be good from the trailers. We had never seen the original Exorcist before, so we decided to watch it this week as well, just so that we knew what we were getting into. I want to go into that a little bit as well. That one sucked. I am very surprised, considering every list puts it as the number one scary movie to this day. Like, I get for its time, it was something new, it was scary, it was weird, stuff like that hadn't been done before, and it was well made for its day, I suppose. But the first hour of the movie has nothing to do with the exorcism. The exorcism lasts like 5 minutes, and it's just not good. It was just bad and icky, also very gross, and not in like a scary way, just in like a, you're doing this to test how far you can go, and it's just icky, not spooky.
Yeah, it very much is coasting on the fact that it was the first to do this.
Yeah.
If another movie had come out 6 months prior and been as shocking and scary, I don't think anyone would remember this movie. It is remembered and revered because it was the first. I even actually was looking after, like, can someone explain to me why people think the original Exorcist is so good? Every single article I found just listed that it was the first to do this, and that's what makes it scary. I'm like, no, that's what made it scary back then. But I don't know. And I'm a fan of older films and more, not the like conventional movies of the day and stuff. I like those types of things. And I did not think the original Exorcist was well done.
Yeah, it was like a collection of 5-minute scenes that had nothing to do with anything, leading up to just perverted phrases coming from a 12-year-old's mouth, which I guess was scary or shocking for that time. But first of all, 12-year-olds talk like that all the time now, and it's gross and weird, and I just don't want to see it. It wasn't scary, it was just off-putting. Yeah,
and so now that we've alienated 90% of our audience, let's get into our thoughts on the new one.
Well, this is going to alienate them more. I liked this one. It's rated so poorly. I thought it was so good. Well, not like the best movie, obviously. The ending didn't land for me, but 90% of the movie I found very scary versus the original. Like, it wasn't like terrifying, but like they kept in a lot of this like background noise that makes you uncomfortable, and it's just like really tense up until the exorcism, and then the actual exorcism just lets down the whole movie because it's just silly and CGI and stupid. Yeah. But up until that point, I think the girls acted the parts very well. I think the storyline was solid. It actually all made sense together, unlike the first one. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, I mean, again, this movie is not for me. So from that angle,
because he hates horror.
Yeah, taking that out of it, I thought it was very well done. I was tense, I was grossed out, I was scared at times. It's competently put together, shot very well.
There are a few jump scares, but not too many, because I think that's where movies like The Nun and stuff like that fall flat, is they rely solely on jump scares. But this one had a few solid jump scares, but as well as like an overall feeling of dread that was very, I really liked it up until the actual exorcism.
And I think the issue is the third act really lets it down. So when you walk out of the movie to sit down and write your review, you're left with a bad taste in your mouth because the third act is not good. On top of that, I think fans of the original are upset this didn't push it far boundaries far enough, potentially. They bring back an old character or two, and they don't
really have a purpose.
Have a lot to do with the film, and so if you were really excited that they were coming back, they're shown a ton in the trailers. I thought they were going to be like a main character.
I did too.
And they're kind of sidelined for a lot of it. So I could see, you were upset by that. And I guess on paper, if you look at it, you bring back an old character and don't use them well. What's the original Exorcist? Little girl gets possessed. Well, now we'll do it with 2 little girls. Like, on paper, it is a very studio film, but I think the performances, the vibe, and the creepiness elevate it past just a bunch of studio notes. And I don't know. I'm surprised this one is not being rated higher, especially with how well horror has been received recently. I think this is by far the scariest movie we've seen together, and probably one of the better horror films, and yet there's movies out there that are getting like 95%.
Talk to Me, I think, is in the 90s, and that was not even remotely scary for a fraction of that movie. And this one, I think it did such a solid job up until the last act.
Yeah, and like Evil Dead Rise has an 84%. I'd put this on the same level as Evil Dead Rise, if not a little bit. Evil Dead Rise is grosser and gorier. This is scarier and more tense.
To be fair, I think Evil Dead Rise stays more true to the source material, and this one doesn't follow that same weird plot line that the original follows. Like, it's not the same weird cuts and stuff, which I like better, but I guess if you did want it to be super similar to the original, I could see why it's a little bit different, but definitely not a 23% Rotten Tomatoes. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, I am very surprised. I would be interested, again, I say this all the time, Rotten Tomatoes needs to go back to also listing the average score, because I would wager a 6 out of 10 for them is fresh. I would wager there's a lot of 5s, 5.5s, people who just aired on it wasn't quite together, and if just, a few of those people had bumped up their score by a 0.5 point, I bet this would be sitting, not a 80 or 90%, but this should be at like a 75.
Yeah, I would put it in like the 70s. But so I'm very surprised, and I know we're going to get a lot of hate because people are such little cult fans of the original, but I thought this one was better. I liked it.
Yeah. I would watch this one again way before I watched the original again.
Yeah.
Even though this scared me more.
But for a generic outline, it follows 2 girls who disappear into the woods. This is all shown in the trailer. And then when they come back, they're clearly possessed by something evil. It's obviously called The Exorcist, so there's an exorcism. But yeah, I would recommend it. I think it's really good, especially, it's October, it's spooky season, take all your friends to it. I think I would recommend it for, like, if you're wanting a solid horror movie. Obviously, like we said, the last act kind of falls flat, but up until then, like, I stay up later than him at night, and I found myself, like, looking around in the dark because I was a little bit scared after, and that's what I want from a scary movie.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect Halloween movie. I think we've gotten recently, like, again, a Talk to Me. I can see why some people really connected with it or whatever, but that is not a crowd pleaser movie. This is a crowd pleaser Halloween. We want to watch something spooky. Go see this movie. Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want this around Halloween. This is exactly what I would expect for this type of movie.
Yep. All right, let's move into spoilers. All right, going into spoilers. So yes, these girls go into the woods. I don't know. I don't want to say the main girl. Let me look up what her name is. So Lydia Jewett, she plays Angela Fielding. She wants to talk to her mother. Her mother died in childbirth with her. And she was raised by her father, who cares about her a lot. He's a little overprotective, whatever. So she lies and says she's going to a friend's house, but her and her friend go into the woods and try and talk to her mother using, like, spiritual summoning practices, whatever. And they disappear for 3 days. When they are found again in a barn, they have no shoes on, their feet are burned and, torn up and stuff. They walked, 30 miles over the course of 3 days. And they start to act weird. The doctors say there's nothing wrong with them, that they can go home. And then she kind of attacks her dad and then has a seizure and ends up in the psych ward. And the other girl kind of has a breakdown at church and ends up, has a full breakdown at church and ends up in the psych ward too. She ends up being locked up at home because her parents don't think that she's crazy. They think that she's possessed, which is fair enough because she is. And then, they have an exorcism. They bring in a few different religions, which I found interesting and cool, more so than they did in the original one, which was just, the Catholic Church kind of, maybe. I don't really know because they didn't fully talk about a lot in the original. I feel like it was like a father priest guy. Yeah,
it was the Catholic Church. But going back, Leslie Odom Jr. plays Angela's dad, Tanner, and he's kind of the main character. We open on him and his wife. His wife dies in an earthquake. Well, she gets injured in an earthquake, and he has to choose whether to save the baby that's in her in her womb, or save his wife. And we don't know what he chooses until later in the film, and it's a whole thing, whatever. But the story, the girls are not majorly in it until they're possessed. They're there, and you get to know them a little bit and see a little bit of who they are and their personality and endear them to the audience. But then they're possessed for 90% of the runtime, and it's really about the parents trying to figure out what to do and how to help them. And where I can see a lot of people being like, oh, well, they didn't want to just feature Catholics, it's modern left-wing propaganda to throw all these other religions and representation in there. I saw it more as, this is a father who is not Catholic, trying to do literally whatever he can. He invites priests, he invites pastors, he invites people from all different walks of life, and anyone in his circle that he can get a hold of who has some idea of what could possibly help, he invites them in. And what parent wouldn't do that?
Yeah.
And even in the end, the super religious family, Catherine's parents, they even are on board for all of these other people, and they all have to come together because regardless of what religion you are, you're standing there in the face of evil. And that's kind of the point of the movie, which is kind of heartwarming and a good message for a horror movie, which is weird.
And in doing this, when he goes to collect all these people, he invites Ellen Burstyn, who played Chris McNeil in the original, the mother, who's, her daughter Reagan was possessed, whatever. He invites her. She's in about 3 scenes in the movie. She was in every scene in the trailer. Every single scene you can think of, Chris McNeil right there. But
I can see that upsetting some people because they promise you a movie in which the original cast member comes back and is dealing with a new exorcism.
Yeah.
And she's there for 5 minutes.
But she shows up, gives a half, stupid explanation about, why her daughter's not there. Probably because she didn't really want to come back for this movie, the actress. She is in like 1 scene at the very end, but she didn't want to come back, it seems like. So she gives the stupid explanation about why her daughter isn't around. She goes with them and goes to Catherine's house, which is the other little girl, and gets stabbed in the eyes and spends the rest of the time in the hospital. The end. Yeah. And her daughter shows up right at the end to be like, hi, you're blind now. I'll be here.
Yep. And so, again, that is not handled well. I understand with these, like, quote-unquote legacy sequels, you need to bring back the original characters, even for just cameos or whatever. But I do think the better version of this movie, fair enough, she exists in this world, and so the dad seeks her out. And that's fair enough, but I don't think if you're going to bring her back, you need to use her. If you're going to just have it be like, he goes and asks for help and she goes, hey, this is beyond my power. Like, I had to I wasn't even there for the exorcism, which she says, and like you need the priests to come help you, go seek out these people, go talk to this person, go find this, that, and then it's just like, oh cool, she was there and she helps in her way, but like, I don't know, I don't think you needed her to go all the way there and reconfront. There's almost like a second movie they wanted to soft launch of her and her daughter and their issues and stuff.
And like that could have been, you know, part of the second half of her kind of like, she could have just gone to the exorcism and talked to the demon because she's spoken to it before, but they just blinded her and left her in a hospital instead. And I was just kind of like, all right.
Yeah.
Whatever. But yeah, so then they do an exorcism. The demon kind of gives them the option. They're like, choose one of the girls, and everyone there with common sense is like, obviously we're not going to choose one. You're trying to turn us against each other because all of us together are too powerful for you. But then stupid dum-dum dad guy for Catherine's dad, the other girl's dad, not the main guy, decides to choose his daughter because he's an idiot. So the demon kills his daughter because he's like, you're a selfish little dum-dum, and lets the other one go. And that's it.
And like that worked as an idea and in the film and made sense for the characters and stuff. I had a feeling that's where it was going because of how much that dad was awful. What was weird is like they make this whole big deal. The Catholic priest doesn't get permission from the diocese to perform the exorcism, and so he's just sitting out praying in his car, and then, you know, he hears what's going on inside, and the main dad's like, hey, like the battle's in there, don't just sit out here and pray. I don't care if your church didn't ordain this, like there's 2 girls in there suffering. And so he does come in to help, and then he just he walks in like a superhero, and everyone's like, yeah, he's here, and then just within like 20 seconds he gets his head turned around and dies. And like, I don't know, I didn't feel like that was used enough. It didn't ruin the hope for everyone in the room. It didn't shock me or surprise. Yeah,
like they didn't even stop to be like, oh my god, he's dead. They were literally just like, oh, okay, and then continue going.
Yeah, and then there's just, it devolves into weird CGI shooting stuff up into the sky and like creating weird shapes and doing nonsense.
And that's where it falls flat. And also like they do that weird happy conclusion where they're giving some speech about how, you know, things change and people need to grow and they're going to school and whatever. And it's like, okay, we didn't need that.
Yeah. I feel like if you cut out a lot of the CGI and just went for a much more straightforward exorcism.
Yeah, because in the original she does, I mean, like she pukes the pea soup, but she doesn't like puke out the demon when it goes to possess the priest in the original.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like, why are we doing that now?
Yeah, and so like if you just do a normal exorcism, the father chooses his own daughter, she then gets killed, and then honestly just kind of like show the main dad thinking his daughter is dead in his arms, and then she comes back, opens her eyes, and he's happy, end the movie.
Yeah.
What else is there? Yeah.
There was no reason for the last like 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. But all right, what would you rate it?
Yeah, I'd give it like a 7.5 for a horror movie. You know?
I think as a movie, 7.5. Personally, like a 3 or a 4 because I don't enjoy these. But as a movie for horror fans, it's like a 7.5.
Yeah.
And the devil never gives up.
She knows who I am. Where's the other girl?
All right, this week I chose As Bestas, or The Beasts. It is a Spanish-French thriller-ish, directed by Rodrigo Sorogoyen.
This one we are going to have very differing opinions. We have the exact opposite opinion on this movie, so...
Yeah, oddly, I think our ratings might be kind of similar, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
So this movie is in 3 languages, predominantly Spanish, French, and Galician, which funnily enough, one of your coworkers is from Galicia, which was kind of cool that we had heard of this place and knew where it was set. But it's a small section of Spain on kind of the just north of Portugal, that kind of corner of Spain. And a couple from France who are kind of educated and had some money decide to buy a farm and just become farmers in this small farming community.
They're also like flipping houses and stuff, and they're investing their own money into like fixing these. So,
and then just giving them away, not like charging. It's not like flipping houses to make profit. They're flipping houses because they're like, oh, we can, and so
they like to,
and we want to support this community. But then their neighbors are these two brothers who have lived there their whole lives and are struggling farmers, and
they work on their mother's farm.
Yeah, and we find out there's been some offers from some wind turbine developers and stuff for the land, and it creates this tension.
And they're offering less than the land is worth is also kind of an important factor.
Yeah, they're a classic. They're trying to they show the farmer what looks like a big number, but over the course of your life is insignificant. And of course, these farmers who have never really had money look at it and go, wow, that looks great. The French guy who's had money himself looks at it and goes, you know what, if we actually just work our farms, we'll be good and we can maybe rebuild this town and grow it and we'll be okay. But he's the outsider and whatever. And so there's just tension between them. And without giving too much away, probably a little over halfway through the movie, it kind of turns around and becomes a different story about remaining somewhere where tragedy has happened, and when do you move on and when do you stick to your guns and stick it out.
Which is where our opinions completely differ. I found the first half to be actually interesting and kept me engaged. I found the second half to be so boring. I was literally checking my phone every 2 seconds waiting for it to be over.
And I found the first half fine. It's something I've seen a million times. It honestly, I said to her, it felt like RMN, which we reviewed earlier this year.
Which I hated.
Which she hated. But the first half of it felt like that, but like a Animal Crossing version, like a tame, farmers plodding around, whereas RMN delved deeper into current political issues. This could have been set at any time, and it's just a story of neighbors arguing.
Now
at
I want
its
to play
core.
Animal Crossing.
But yeah, and then the second half actually I thought was more interesting and different and profound and asked questions that you don't necessarily know the answers to, whereas this, it's like, stop arguing with your neighbors, don't be a jerk. That's the solution to the first half of the movie. The second half, it's like, ooh, should she do this? Should she do that? Is her daughter right? Is her daughter wrong? It introduces a lot more gray to the situation. And I found that far more interesting than the first half of the movie, which I felt was a little just cut and dry. Neighbors argue.
Well, should we move into spoilers
we can give
more?
I don't think there's too much more to say. It looks nice. Galicia is very pretty.
Very pretty.
You want to go visit your coworker when she's over there. All right, spoilers for As Bestas. Not asbestos.
I think the biggest one would be, so it follows, as we said, this man, Frenchman, and Antoine, and he is fighting with his neighbors because he does not want to sign for the wind turbines to be there, and they want him to, and they basically are threatening him the whole movie, following him, making his life miserable. They put car batteries in his well so it kills all his plants and fills them with lead. And this all leads up, he starts filming them, which is what I found interesting, is kind of like him spying, trying to catch them, and the police are like, well, there's nothing we can really do, like, you're also being aggressive towards them. And he's filming these brothers until eventually they corner him in the woods and kill him. And that scene was weird and awkward, but yeah. And then after that, it's his favorite part, which is just literally his wife sits at home for the rest of the movie
That's
and
not...
occasionally goes on a walk.
So that is a literal interpretation of events, but I think thematically the first half of the movie is just
espionage.
two neighbors not getting along and arguing and escalating, and yes, they go way to the extremes of putting the car battery and eventually murdering him, threatening his wife, and all of this stuff. But he also at many turns is, you know, he, instead of, as soon as he finds something, instead of going to the police or talking to them rationally, trying to get them to admit it, he just runs in and starts screaming at them.
Because he's aggressive and stupid.
Yeah, and so the police, like, look at the footage and they're like, yeah, we'll tell your neighbors to stop waving guns at you, but you're on their property, you barged into their yard and started screaming at them, and that's on video too, so, like, you can't do that. And so I was just like, okay, it's neighbors, it's gonna escalate, eventually someone's gonna die. And that's what happens. And so I found that just kind of cut and dry.
I don't know. Something just kept me engaged because it was kind of quick moving. The rest of the movie is just so slow.
It slows way down. But I think, yes, the mom or the wife just stays there. But she stays because it was her husband's dream to be there, and she wants to make this farm work. And if she leaves, she knows the developers will get the land. Because all the other farmers will sign and everything. And then her daughter comes to visit and is like, how can you live next to your neighbors? You're in denial. You can't accept the truth of what's happening. And they have a fantastic argument that I thought was really well acted and well done, in which both of them try and make their point. And you can kind of see, I get kind of why she wants to stay. She's still looking for his body. She wants to prove that the two neighbors did it and get them in trouble. She also wants to prove that even though you've done this to me, our farm will still be successful and we can survive. Whereas the daughter's like, how can you live next to dad's murderers and just act like nothing happened? You've got to, come home and just be a sane human. And I found that, I was like, I don't know whose side I'm on. And then the daughter kind of tries to reconcile things, and they work together, and then the neighbors start being more creepy and intense towards them.
And then they find the video camera, and it never comes into play again, which was also kind of just for me. Like, why make the whole first half of the movie about him filming them if it's never going to amount to anything?
Yeah, I do agree. I think, honestly, the little switch I would make is give him a weatherproof camera.
Yeah.
And then the fact that a year later they found the SD card unlikely, but could have survived a winter and they could recover something from it.
Yeah, because even though they find his body, they can't prove that they were the ones who killed him, technically, not without a shadow of a doubt, you know?
And so, I do agree it kind of falls flat, but I think the first half of the movie should be the opening of the movie. The first 20 minutes, maybe even the first act at most, not the first, this movie is kind of 4 acts, and that's the first half is the husband, Antoine, and I think if you just condense all of that into this real quick and dirty, neighbors escalate, and then just make this a drama about a daughter and her mother trying to decide what to do and trying to prove that the two neighbors, the brothers, did it. Make that the kind of espionage thriller thing. We know this camera's out there and she's got to find it. We know the brothers did it, and her trying to prove it without getting them, they're kind of on her trail and making sure she doesn't find stuff. That could have been the drama and the tension, as opposed to this weird, disjointed 2 halves of a movie that are very different.
Yeah. I will say in the second half, I did like one scene where she goes over to the neighbor's house and just ignores the brothers and speaks to their mom, and is just like, you and I are both going to be alone now. What are we gonna do? Kind of a thing. I liked that. But other than that, it really, really dragged for me in the second half. I did not enjoy any of the dynamic with her and her daughter. I found it very boring.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I did not.
Well, what would you rate it?
I will give it a 6.
I will give it a 4.
Yeah. I liked concepts in this movie. I think it's well shot. It was an interesting part of the world to see.
It could have been an hour long, I guess.
But yeah, there's, other than the question of should the mother stay, it doesn't pose anything new to the world. Like,
had it been like the husband stuff happened within the first like 20 minutes and the last 40 was her like trying to figure stuff out, it would have been, I think, a pretty solid movie, but it dragged on too far for me. So
yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty. That's our thoughts on As Bestas.
Serías libre justo aquí, ¿no? Es una historia preciosa.
¿Tú crees que este sitio para mí es un capricho? No, Sean. Este sitio para mí es todo. Es mi proyecto de vida.
No, yo no.
Mío y de mi mujer.
Yo no pienso eso.
¿Qué piensas?
All right, thank you for listening to our episode this week. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Nerd and Normie and tune in every Monday for a new episode.
And if you're listening on YouTube, like and subscribe. And if you are on an audio platform, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us out.
Thank you.